Sigewinne has an interesting kit, and today I want to talk about it. That's it, that's the intro. Quick disclaimers before we begin. This is not a meta-related video. I want to approach this discussion in the same way I approach my other videos, by talking about the design concept, not the design execution. If you're here to get insight on whether Sigewinne will be a viable unit, then this isn't really the right place. I'll be explaining whether I think her design feels cohesive or if there's inherent flaws. This is a heavily opinionated video. I have my standards on what makes a unit well designed, but those may differ from yours. If I have something to say that's good or bad about her kit, it should not be taken as factual evidence. And finally, I will not be discussing any unofficial information. This includes things like talent multipliers, elemental ICD, particle generation, etc. All of that info is subject to change, and if you watch my videos a lot, you know that I don't really care too much about numbers. So if it seems like I'm skirting around specific details about her kit, it probably means I am. The rest of my disclaimers I can just flash on screen because it's stuff I cover all the time. You can pause and read that if you need to. Down below, I also have it all listed down, as well as music credits and social media links. Alright, let's talk about Sigewinne's kit. I'm currently under the assumption that if you're watching this, you've already seen the special program, and therefore you know what her kit does. So I'll just do a very quick razor summary. For her skill, you launch a bubble that damages enemies and heals allies. Holding the skill grows the bubble, making it last longer, and deals more damage and healing. Large bubbles can trap smaller enemies for a set period. Using her skill drops Nouvelette's balls, which she can pick up to gain Bond of Life. Heal Bond of Life, and you get energy in return to help use her burst. Speaking of, her burst is just a blast of water that deals hydro damage in an area in front of her. It pulls the droplets in so she doesn't have to walk around and collect them, but her burst is just a damage ability. One of her passives gives her extra healing when party members have a Bond of Life, and the other passive gives Sigewinne convalescence stacks when she casts her skill. Allies who deal off-field skill damage will have this damage increase based on Sigewinne's max HP, and this consumes stacks. And her exploration will heal the active character when they are underwater and below a certain HP amount, but healing will result in a damage resistance debuff. So what do we have? We have a combination of a healer, damage dealer, and a skill damage buffer. She also technically has some crowd control utility, but that's a bit more negligible in this discussion. So that's the quick overview of her kit. Now I want to discuss my personal problems with it, and once again, everything I say comes from a design standpoint. So let's start off with her burst. In most scenarios, healers are generally not meant to be on-fielders. We have a couple exceptions of course, the most notable ones being Noelle or Kokomi. They are designed to be both your on-field DPS and healer, and this lets you slot in someone else to cover different utility or another form of damage. Sigewinne's burst has practically no use outside of damage, and the way it operates isn't enough to warrant her as a battle healer, because her burst lasts for just a few seconds, so to fill in that time gap in rotations, you still need to bring another on-fielder. However, if you bring a dedicated on-fielder, that means Sigewinne's burst window takes away from their own field time. And yes, it's just a few seconds, but those few seconds could be used for your actual DPS to deal more damage. So naturally, the response is to just not use her burst. But this is where the problem lies in her design philosophy. In her kit, there is a bunch of utility that subconsciously incentivizes the player to use her burst. For example, you collect the droplets and get energy so you can use her burst consistently, or you get this hydro damage bonus to maximize her burst. And I'll talk about it a bit more later on, but if you pull her weapon, it grants a burst crit rate bonus. My personal take on the character design in Genshin is that their utility should be nudging the player towards a certain playstyle. And yes, not everyone plays the character as it's meant to be played. Barbara's primarily a healer, but some use her as a DPS. Raiden's an on-field DPS, but some use her as a Hyperbloom trigger. Xingqiu's an off-field DPS, but some play him as a healer. Yes, there are people out there who play healer Xingqiu. Now let's quickly return to the whole battle healer idea. What makes Noelle and Kokomi's design much better than Sigewinne's? In my opinion, it's because using them on field maximizes both their healing and damage. If you use them on field as a damage dealer, you're getting good healing on the side. And if you use them as a healer, then you get good damage on the side. It's a package deal. Sigewinne's burst is just on-field damage, and her skill is quick swap healing. It's much easier to ignore her burst playstyle as a result. But the point I'm trying to make with this is that if Sigewinne has all this extra utility to boost her burst, then it tells the player that she's partially designed to be a burst DPS. But with the field time issue I mentioned earlier, it's more likely players will not use her burst. and if you don't use her burst, there's a lot of utility in her kit that gets wasted. That's the first issue I noticed, and the second pertains to her skill damage buffing. Something that was mentioned is that the skill damage bonus she provides is based around an effect that only Sigewinne gets. This basically means every party member is sharing the same stacks. So let's say you're in a team with Furina and Kuki. Naturally, you want Furina to use these stacks because it deals more damage, but if someone like Kuki hits an enemy with her skill, that will also consume stacks. Kuki's personal damage is very low, so it won't be benefiting as much from Sigewinne's passive. Kuki also hits more frequently than Furina, so this would be a relatively high amount of stacks getting used. The main issue is that Sigewinne's passive has a lot of potential for wasted stacks. It also means that you can't really run a dedicated skill damage team as well as you'd like. If you run Furina, Nahida, or Official, for example, those stacks are going to get drained much quicker. I also find it a bit weird that her passive is limited to off-field skill damage only. A character like Alhaitham does skill damage while on-field, but he can't use it with Sigewinne. And let's go back to that Furina Nahida Official comp. Chances are, Nahida would be the on-fielder here, but since she's on-field, she can't use Sigewinne's A1. I will give credit where credit is due. This idea is new and interesting. We don't have a dedicated skill damage buffer in Genshin, so Sigewinne opens up that niche. And of course, we don't have official information on how many stacks she provides or how much damage bonus she gives, so there is still a potential that she can be really good in a skill damage focused team. Okay, so you don't really care about her burst, and her skill damage buffing has some flaws. What else are you left with? Just her healing. And as we know from Genshin's history, a character who purely heals doesn't cut it anymore. For a healer to be good, especially a 5-star healer, they need to provide other forms of utility and provide it well. If Sigewinne's only real utility is healing, then what's stopping her from being replaceable? Why use her in a Bloom comp when Baiju's A4 can just buff the Bloom damage himself? Why use her in Vape when Bennett can provide an attack buff? There's nothing else about her kit that makes her stand out in any sort of niche. Other things I want to quickly discuss. Her passive with the Bond of Life is nice against the Fatui operatives or maybe the Arlecchino boss, but those enemies don't provide a crazy amount of Bond of Life. Other healers can clear the bond just fine, and for characters who have Bond of Life in their kit, Sigewinne can't really help them out. Arlecchino can't be healed, and while Claren can convert healing into Bond of Life, I don't really see it being super special. Any healer out there can speed up her combos, so why would Sigewinne's healing be any different? The final issue is her exploration passive. The res debuff seems pointless for an overall passive. Like, healing the party while underwater is fine. I don't know what the point is with the trade-off. So I know that's a lot of negative commentary on her kit, and I don't want to be a complete negative Nancy here. So even if she's not the best in these scenarios, what situations can she at least be viable in? One scenario immediately comes to mind when you look at her kit. Furina. If Furina drains the entire party's HP, and Sigewinne heals it all up, then that's a really good burst of fanfare stacks. You also provide Hydro Resonance, which grants 25% HP to your party. Once again, good for Furina's damage and Sigewinne's healing. And finally, Sigewinne's passive buffs skill damage, something that Furina specializes in. And if there's one thing I will say Sigewinne looks to be the best in, it's supporting Furina. But we have two other Hydro healers, and I can explain why Sigewinne would technically be the best option here. Barbara has burst healing, which is good for Furina comps, but it's an 80 cost burst and she generates no particles. Sigewinne can burst heal, but with no energy requirements to do so. Kokomi's team-wide healing is also burst reliant, but at least she has the energy generation to use it more consistently. But in order to team heal, she needs to be on-field, which means unless your team is built around Kokomi being the driver and on-field DPS, her field time takes away from another DPS. Same issue with Barbara's team healing through her skill. As niche as it is, what Sigewinne provides best is being a Hydro quick swap healer that still team heals. Just pop her skill and swap off to the next unit in your rotation. I don't want to make any conclusions on it being a good situation, but I believe it's where at least she will shine the most. Next thing I'm going to cover is the weapon. For this, we have actual official information on its stats, so I will be showing some basic calculations. It has a 542 base attack and a 66.2% HP bonus. Your goal with the passive is to get 3 stacks, one through using a skill, another by using healing, and the last by gaining Bond of Life. At 1 stack, you gain 12% HP, at 2, it's 24, and at 3, it's 40. At 3 stacks, you also gain 28% crit rate to your burst. Everything in this bow lines up with Sigewinne's kit, and personally, I don't mind that it's niche. When I do my signature weapon series, you guys already know how niche I make those weapons anyway. My main gripe is once again the burst crit rate. If Sigewinne doesn't use her burst, then this weapon loses out on a chunk of its utility. Granted, even if you don't use her burst, 106% HP bonus on the weapon is still gonna make it her best in slot. Fortunately, Sigewinne isn't the only user of this weapon. We have two other HP bow users, Diona and Yelan. Now, Diona can only gain 2 stacks, and Yelan can only get 1. But an HP bonus is still an HP bonus, so I'll show basic comparisons on where the numbers may lie. For Diona, healing and shielding are both around 10% better than recurve, but if you're running an ER weapon like Fav or Sackbow, then it's around 20% better, but keep in mind that energy needs will go up. For Yelan, Aqua performs around 11% better, but the new bow is around 7% stronger than recurve. I didn't bother doing calcs on ER bows because we can safely assume the same as Diona. Higher damage but also higher ER needs. Alright, let's quickly wrap this up. What are my thoughts on Sigewinne's game design? Personally, I think it would have been better if she was a 4-star. If we had this kit on a 4-star character, I would have been much more forgiving on her kit being a bit wonky. Usually, I just assume Hoyo's being experimental, and as long as it's on a 4-star character, that's fine with me. But we don't have a lot of 4-star Hydra units either, so adding her to that roster would have been a great addition. And honestly, even story-wise, she feels like a 4-star. Her presence and impact in the plot wasn't as strong, so I don't see her being a premium character in that regard either. However, she's getting a story quest, and that's a plus in my eyes. Those have been very good lately. You might be wondering if I'll ever make a Sigewinne rework video. The answer to that is maybe. I usually prefer covering characters that I actually have, so if I never roll for her, I'd be less inclined to make that video. To compensate, I'll leave a few notes on what I would do if I were to do a proper rework video. The main thing is that I would focus her in a skill damage buffing role. It would give her a proper niche aside from healing, and it would generally be flexible enough in multiple team comps. Simple things to do that is give every party member their own stacks and let them use it while on field, and then change the bow from burst crit rate to a team-wide skill crit rate bonus. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I mean, the character's not even out yet, so there's so much that could change by the release date. Once again, these are just my thoughts based around game concept design, not numbers. We'll have much better conclusions on her in-game performance once she's officially out. But now it's your turn. Let me know in the comments whether or not you are going to pull for Sigewinne, and if you are, I'm curious to know why. I'd like to hear your own thoughts on what you like or didn't like about her kit design, and what you would change if you had the chance to. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like and subscribe to support the channel. Thanks again for watching everybody, and I will see you all next time. Bye!